Friends, welcome to our video 11C on Plotinus and the Quadrivium of Pythagoras. Now this interconnection with the work of Plotinus is very, very obscure. I don't think, although I have heard some people kind of mention this, and they talk about Pythagoras and his Tetractys, which we won't discuss here. That's a lift on its own, these 11 Tetractys. And there might be possible interconnections with his Quadrivium, which comes from more ancient times. Homer in his Iliad, and Orpheus in with his hymns, his songs. This is where Pythagoras. This is the lineage of Pythagoras in the context of which we discussed here, because you wouldn't believe this, but Thales of Miletus, which the mathematician often quoted in mathematics, was there was a little bit of overlap with his life and that of Pythagoras, but they really had two opposing worldviews. Thales was a Stoic, and Heraclitus is also in the mix there. He was a materialist. Pythagoras, what distinguishes him on the one side, of course, these Thales and Heraclitus, their lineage comes through right up until today, as can be seen in the wonderful works of Professor McGilchrist. However, this Pythagoras we are talking about now, and which Plotinus is following, in a sense, in a deep sense actually, has its roots in a more ancient Egypt and in the works of Orpheus. And of course Pythagoras is followed by Parmenides, and then Plato, and there is also in the mix Zoroaster, and the Shiite philosophers, the Iranian school of thought, to which Rumi belongs. In short, there is a very long history of borrowing of the materialists, the Stoics, or the Gnostics, borrowing from Plato, which we will briefly discuss a little later on. So we are going to look at how is Orpheus and Pythagoras interconnected with Plotinus. I don't think this has been done in this forum before, and I couldn't have done it without the work of Thomas Taylor. Now, when it seems to me that when people hear this name, they just close off, because for reasons which might follow in this video. So our Quadrivium, we are not gonna. We've actually touched upon this in video 8 and 9 with Synesius, Pythagoras, and his fourfold harmonic planes, which is very far from today, and we will see in our in this here we see our icon, which is depicting a certain similitude with, because that's the role of an icon, a certain similitude with Pythagoras and his fourfold planes of world formation. And how it connects with Plotinus. But here we have the good Professor Verweke, a man who is marvelously comfortable with his subject, and it's a very wonderful experience to listen how wonderfully he captures the Stoic and Gnostic essences. In his levels of intelligibility, New Platonism, and 4E cognitive science, he mentions that Eric Pearl translates the title of Plotinus on the three hypostases as follows. He says,
the title is usually translated as on the three principal hypostases. Hypostasis, standing under, the underlying nature of things. And that's a fair enough translation. I think Pearl's translation is brilliant and much more accurate in disclosing what the text is about. He translates it on the three primary levels of reality. A leveled ontology.
To which we will make just the following observation with reference to Plotinus. We may say that the inseparability of self-knowledge and reality of Plotinus happens according to otherness and difference, which, says Plotinus, is the eternal bond of all souls with the luminosity of true living being, or the luminosity of self and intelligible matter, under which his hypostasis stands, all of which is interconnected with the elevation and internal convertive participation of the human soul within an intellect that is transcendently great. This is not transcendental idealism, which is reflected within the fivefold affordances of the Pythagorean Quadrivium or tetrad. We investigate Plotinus and imagination of the latter Platonists in this video. And here we see Matt Siegel and friends in footnotes to Plato. They make several worthy points about Plotinus in their dialogues on Plotinus. And these are called Processing Plotinus Bersonian Reading, and also in his Plotinus Without Emanation. We will see why this is a very controversial viewpoint with Pedro Brea and Jack Bagby. More pertinent to Plotinus's internal unified emanation of light is a reference made by the trio of the light cone of Bergson. Here is his light cone, his inverted light cone in matter, and he says, the material point, which is here, says Pedro Brea, represents pure matter in Bergson. Intelligibles are placed immediately after this point. For Bergson, says our trio, is a material point represent pure an abstract past, where elan vital, an energy or force, and intelligibles diffuses or disperses infinite multitude through matter and form in a timed evolution. We are going to see about infinite multitude here, and how the infinite multitude of Plotinus is all perfect multitude in the works of Proclus. How that is generated by the three hypostases of Plotinus. And also we have, before our modern gentleman, we have Robert of Lincoln in 1168. He follows Dionysius the Areopagite, drawing from Plotinus's Aeneid says Aeneid's light is by nature self-diffusive, and beginning as a corporeal material point, forms an instantaneous sphere at any particular point. And this is an image of his 9 spheres, and how he says, and these spheres, it's beautiful notion, says that they are forming as different gradations of matter, to which David Lindbergh, author of Optics from Alkindi to Kepler, notes, Grosseteste completely ignores the emanation light theory of Plotinus. In this video, we have J.R.S. Mead introduce Thomas Taylor. Mead is a late 19th century philologist. He's fluent in Greek, Latin, and Sanskrit, and he's a Gnostic philosopher who is very knowledgeable about Hermes. In our videos 4A and B, we draw extensively from his work because he also treats of Plotinus, of Proclus. We introduce the theory of Plotinus on the unreceptiveness of intelligible matter, drawing from more than 50 years contemplation on Orpheus, the Egyptians, Homer, Pythagoras, Plato, and the latter Platonists of the modern pioneer and a mystic, Thomas Taylor. We indicate how Plotinus's view on divine love, fantasia or imagination, divine emanation, and intelligible matter is interconnected with the hypothesis of the summit of the Quadrivium of Pythagoras, together with the view of light of Proclus. For orientation, we'll begin with the following remarks of Kenneth Guthrie. He is a 1930s, 40s philosopher there who quotes Zeller. He says, the physical elements to which the helicists, the materialists, amongst which is Heraclitus, Thales of Miletus, Aristotle, and in turn attributed to finality to Plato, united into Pythagorean matter. Big question mark. What does he mean with that? Which remained an element of Numenian dualism. In addition to this, our friend Kenneth Guthrie, 1871 to 1940, says, there is still other Pythagorean traces in common between Numenius and Plotinus, such as, for instance, the cause that the indeterminate dyad, that is to say, heaven and earth, which is also known as the indefinite duad of Proclus, split off from the divinity is tolma, rashness or boldness. Everything outside of the divinity is in a continual state of flux. That said, we present our selection of the main points of J.R.S. Mead, since he treats of Proclus, from his beautiful introduction to the second edition of Thomas Taylor's translation of the select works of Plotinus. Of course, if you have seen our introductory video, you would have noted there that we treat of the imagination of the latter Platonists in early Christianity, in the works of Thomas Taylor, who follows from Ficino. Ficino was commissioned by the Medici family through the work of Gemistus Platon, and so they called Thomas Taylor a modern Platon. Mead is most likely one of only a few philosophers who extensively uses the words of Thomas Taylor As far as I know, there is also Manly Hall, there is Catherine Rain, who is using his work, but you hear people talk about her work and they say nothing about our mystic Thomas Taylor. He uses Taylor's philosophy, and he admits that he's integrating his Gnostic views with that of Taylor and the latter Platonists, because Taylor knows more Plato. With regards to the influences on Plotinus, he says, of course, Plotinus' preceptor, his teacher, was Ammonius Saccas, with Numenius, Amelius, and Porphyry as the contemporaries of Plotinus. There are different perspectives on Numenius, Amelius, and Porphyry. Numenius, the father of the Syrian school, out of which Amelius and Porphyry came into New Platonism, who represented, says he, Hellenizing Judaism of the Greeks. The admiration of Numenius for Philo goes so far as to ask whether it is Philo who Platonizes or Plato who Philonizes. He dubs Plato the Attic Moses. Conflicting views, however, exist on the influence of Numenius, of our three persons here, on Plotinus. Example, Mead quotes Harnack, also a philosopher, 1815 to 1930. But if we search Plotinus for evidence of any actual influence of Jewish and Christian phraseology, says he, we search in vain. And the existence of such influence is all the more unlikely because it is only the latter Neoplatonism that offers striking and deep-rooted parallels to Philo and the Gnostics through Numenius. On the system of Plotinus, he says, the whole system of Plotinus revolves around the idea of the threefold principle or trichotomy or trinity of pure intuition. In these aspects, he says, it bears a remarkable similarity to the great Vedantic system of Indian philosophy. Deity, spirit, soul, and body, macrocosmic and microcosmic, and the essential identity of the divine in man and with the divine in the universe. On Plotinus's matter and form, Mead has the following to say. It is here that the system of Plotinus is somewhat weak, says he. It is true that he has strong admiration for the beauties of nature. But in dealing with the problem of matter, he scarcely avoids stumbling. What a perplexing statement. And though he criticizes the view of certain Gnostic schools who made matter the root of all evil, he does not entirely clear himself from a similar conception. He explains, it is the object of the world soul, so to pervade the natural world that all its parts shall be in perfect harmony. But the actual phenomenal world, unity and harmony are replaced by strife and discord, and the result is a conflict and a becoming and a vanishing and an elusive existence. He goes on to say that the least understood part of Plotinus is that which is connected with the practice of theurgy, an ancient practice, the mysteries of Ulysses, which consummate itself in ecstasy, the samadhi of the yoga art of Indian mystics. For years, Plotinus kept secret the teaching of Ammonius Saccas until one Origen, this is not the Origen, the Christian father, but he spilled the beans. What's new? He blew the whistle. Plotinus bestows much labor on the problem of the alone, says he, which he describes as the absolute, and reaches the only conclusion conclusion possible that the alone is inexpressible, or in the words of the Upanishads, the mind falls back from it, unable to reach it. Plotinus himself is inexpressible by words. It must nevertheless produce everything out of itself without suffering any diminution or becoming weaker. He quotes T.M. Johnson, the editor of the Plotinus, as saying, Johnson, an enthusiastic admirer of Taylor, says in the preface to his translation of the three treatises of Plotinus, the only work on Plotinus available, this is one of them that we are using Taylor's original English translation for. This wonderful genius, says Johnson, and a profound philosopher, devoted his whole life to the elucidation and propagation of the Platonic philosophy. By his arduous labors, modern times became acquainted with many of the works of Plotinus. Porphyry, Proclus, and so on. Since Taylor's time, something has been known of Plotinus, but Taylor, is still to many a mere obscure name. English scholarship, the institutions, has left the pioneer work of Thomas Taylor at the turn of the 19th and 20th century, says he, entirely unsupported. I should note that this work on imagination of this time particularly using Plotinus and the lineage of Ficino and Proclus and Taylor is entirely unfunded research, funded by myself in my own time. There's nobody looking over my shoulder or telling me what to do. It's a free inquiry. Taylor was a pioneer, says he, and of pioneers we do not demand the building of government roads. It is true that the perfected scholarship of our own times, I want to put an exclamation mark there, demands a higher standard of translation than Taylor presents. I question this because maybe it will become more clear as we progress through this video and Pythagoras, what Plotinus's views on the unreceptivity of matter truly is, and whether our philologist understood this. But what was true of his critics then, says Mead, is true of his critics in postmodern philosophy. Though they may know more Greek, he knew more Plato. And that's a fact. Thomas Taylor on Numenius, Amelius and Porphyry, he says in his select work, in his introduction, the latent dogmas of the Stoics and Peripatetics, the scholastics, the matter people, are mingled in his writings, and did I just say matter people? The Gnostic philosophers, and Plotinus has condensed in them the metaphysics of Aristotle. He made a separate commentary on Aristotle using these people's views. Plotinus, says Taylor, was not ignorant of geometrical, arithmetic, mechanical, optical, or musical theorems, though he never applied these to the sciences. These sciences to his practical purposes. The commentaries of the Platonic philosophers, Cronius, Numenius, Gaius, Atticus, and others, as also of the Peripatetics, Aspasius, Alexander, Adrastus, and others were presented in his school in Athens. But he borrowed nothing whatever from these, for his conceptions were entirely his own, and his theory was entirely different from theirs. This is what we are going to talk about. He displayed an affinity and a kinship with his preceptor Ammonius Saccas, 175 to 242 AD. Taylor on the philosophy pertaining to arithmetic of the latter Plotinus, he says, the mathematical sciences are indeed the proper means of acquiring wisdom, but they ought not to be considered as its end. He says, the mathematical sciences are the bridge between sense activity and intellectual internal activity. We just previously mentioned that there is an intellect that's transcendently greater than ours, by which we safely pass through the night of oblivion, that is, sense and ignorance, over the dark and stormy ocean of matter. Iliad, the boat of Homer, to the lucid, the Odyssey, to the lucid regions of the intelligible world. Porphyry informs us that some Greeks falsely accused Plotinus of being a plagiary of the doctrines of Numenius, which lie Tryphon, a Stoic, and Plotinus told Amelius. Porphyry adds that he, Amelius, was likewise considered by many as a mere trifler, and threatened with contempt because, says he, they could by no means understand what he had to say. He quotes Cassius Longinus on Plotinus. Cassius Longinus says, I transcendently loved and reverenced the manner of his writing, the density of his conceptions, and the very philosophic disposition of his questions. And indeed I judge the investigations of truth ought only to compare the books of Plotinus with the most excellent of works. Hence Pythagoras. Longinus dedicates writing to Plotinus and Amelius in a note kept by Porphyry, where he says that Plotinus, as it seems, has more certainly explained the Pythagorean and Platonic principles than his predecessors. For the writings of Numenius, Cronius, and Moderatus, and Thrasyllus, Gnostic writings, are not to be compared for accuracy in any part with the books of Plotinus on the same subjects. My emphasis. Taylor on Plotinus and a more ancient theurgic art, ecstasy. Plotinus is in truth more deeply investigating through the internal alchemy of intellectual projection, intuition. The luminous unical summit of Pythagoras and more ancient sages. The internal alchemy of information transfer. We have a video 11a, I think. I'll leave a link in the description. Taylor on Plotinus. Plotinus is more accurately investigating, in the ancient tradition, this luminous divine world, the luminosity of self, or the luminosity of true living being, than in scientifically unfolding the order of the beings it contains. Indeed, his genius on every subject seems to have been more adapted to an intimate perception of the hidden essence of a thing. To which we add, this art has ecstasy as the ultimate aim of a fivefold elevating contemplation of the soul through the lesser and greater mysteries. Taylor observes, though Plotinus did not develop the more particular progressions of true beings, the gods, he inserted the principles of the sublime investigation in his writings, and Plotinus laid the foundation of the admirable and beautiful system which was gradually revealed by succeeding Platonists, and at least received its perfection by the acute, accurate, and elegant genius of Proclus, to which many attests. And we observe the works of Thomas Taylor, the modern pioneer, is still a modern mystery to institutional psychology, philosophy, and gatekeeping. Why? Perhaps the answer will become more clear as we go along with Pythagoras. Previously, we observed that Mead views the body, the theory of matter of Plotinus, as weak. But what is it that he is saying about matter? We are not surprised that Plotinus is well known for his luminous hypostasis, the threefold unity, being, life, and intellect. But we should be surprised about the silence of his embracing the fivefold dialectic elevation of the human soul of Plato. And we should be surprised to learn that the three principles of Plotinus, which ranks as principles on account of their difference, the good, intellect, and soul, is in obscurity. The three principles of Plotinus that ranks according to difference. First, he talks about difference, the bond of difference, which indicates a similitude with the good, and which with respect to the one is seated within the hyparxis of the Pythagorean tetrad and its formative harmonic psychology. Now, what is this harmonic psychology? Well, studies in remote viewing have shown that brain waves and the ordinary, shall we say, our accepted wave mechanics of the world, the light spectrum, is inappropriate here. But here we have Pythagorean harmonics, which is sitting in obscurity, and which is specifically revolving around the elevation of the soul according to an harmonic elevation through the, as we could see in our icon. So here is a completely different kind of harmonics, and I think that we shouldn't miss that this was the high practice of the ancient, as we would say ancient, but it's not so archaic from our perspective. It's not to be judged as archaic or ancient. A completely different world perspective would probably be the best way. So we don't know what these harmonics of Pythagoras is. We just know that Plato himself says that sound and listening with an inner ear in silence is an elevative of the soul, and this is connected with the harmonic psychology of Pythagoras. As things then appear to me, Proclus, following Plotinus, indicate to us in his 6 books the sacred and more mystical and hidden arcana of intelligible sight, hidden sight of Orpheus's ether. That is to say, Orpheus is the creative principle, the ether is the creative principle, the intelligible monad of all perfect multitude, infinite multitude. And it is this, that intelligent sight, ether bound the paternal, not yet seeing, is unproceeding, abiding as the summit. It doesn't proceed into posterior downward unfoldments. To me, this indicates a more mystical meaning, which is the sacred desire to behold. For Plotinus says, from the desire to behold emanates a twofold union. Intellectual perception is a psychical motion towards the good and an aspiration or a desire after it. For intelligent sight, being different from and possessing a similitude to the good, receives and assimilates within the emanation of the desire of beholding, intelligent perception, beholding, the union of the similitude of intelligent beholding, of the intelligent beholding imaginative form of good. And we have placed it here, the union form of the good, similitude and difference. We have essence, the imaginative form of good, and the intelligent beholding. All this is indicated in the circle as a unity. Hence, says Plotinus, the form of the good, being intellectually different from the good, perceives that which it sees as good and desirable to itself, and in consequence of being the imagination of good. But, says he, the good is not in want. Do not desire of any of these desirable things, for the good is sufficient unto itself. So we can, on these things, we think we can say, since the good can neither be the same with, nor different from, nor coordinate with, nor superior to itself. Since this is the case, the connate, infrangible, illuminating union of the similitude of fantasia, the feminine imagination, feminine form, and intelligent self-beholding form of good, contain and comprehend within its illuminating sight at once the difference of self-similitude. The union of the form of the good therefore establishes at once the dominion of the incorruptible bond of difference and similitude throughout the world. Plotinus, again, he says, for intelligible form and intelligible matter, morphe, is truly form, and so that the subject is also real. There is I put a definition of morphe in the description. We don't have time for that. So that intelligible form and intelligible matter is truly form, and so that the subject also is real. In video 11a, we have seen Proclus synoptically teaching us about reflective form, the glittering web of woven by Minerva and the vivific goddesses. He taught us about reflective form, subject matter, and formation. He says, forms, patterns, ideas, participating through being, fashion the whole of the subject matter by which they are received, and this by an internal energy or intellectual activity. Participative form pervades through the whole of the subject matter. For nature fashions body inwardly and not externally, like an artist would a painting or a stonemason. Proclus on subject matter. Very important point here. Sensible forms, therefore, are by participation that which they are said to be the subject nature or subject matter, receiving form externally derived through the separation and division from preceding, immovable, infinitely proceeding, all perfect multitude. That is a continuum, explicitly not duality. Hence, says Plotinus, those who say that matter is essence, if they assert this of luminous intelligible matter, speak rightly, that is to say, according in agreement with Plato and Pythagoras and more ancient sages. For the difference which is in the union of intelligibles, in the luminosity of being, always produces matter, since this difference, which is the first motion, is the principle of matter, is brought forth into light together. Hence, we may say, the illumination of the dominion of imaginative intelligent beholding, which is the form of difference and similitude of the good, this bond necessarily governs the formation of every and all possible psychical formations comprehended within the world soul at once and eternally. Perhaps I don't want to say too much about J.R.S. Mead. I learned a lot from him. His works is very elegant and excellent. But I wonder how did he just skip over this, or didn't he understand it? This bond of difference and similitude necessarily governs the formation of every and all possible psychical formations comprehended within the world soul. As mentioned above, we investigate the perspectives of Plotinus within the context of the iconic tetrad of Pythagoras, using our icon, which is a symbol of the harmonic planes of formation of Pythagoras and Orpheus. His quadrivium or tetrad is reflective of much more ancient connections to Egypt, Orpheus, and Homer, as we said. Indeed, the not-so-archaic Pythagoras magnificently understood internal intellectual projection and intuition, the conceptions of Orpheus and the ancient Egyptians under whom he studied, upon the study of which, no doubt, forms his theatric vision in the ancient interforming sacred tradition. Internal intellectual projection and intuition. I first saw this in a letter to Proclus, to his friend Theodorus the Mechanist, where he explains this as the fourth mode of knowledge. His quadrivium unfolds, Pythagorean quadrivium unfolds the best of ancient Egypt, Babylonia, Persia of Orpheus, Homer and the mysteries of Ulysses as a preceding, elevating and contemplative fountains. The summit of this tetrad is the luminosity or self, or true luminous living being. But there is more. A deeper understanding of this tetrad and its internal activity and motion most certainly form the core teaching of the more ancient sacred mystic traditions. To select initiatives of the schools, of their schools, selected on the basis of their progression through the lesser and greater mysteries. These are specific planes, harmonic planes of elevation. So harmonic planes and patterns of instantaneous world formation is represented with his iconic tetrad, which may be viewed as an elevating guide to the practice of virtue through an internal leader. And we try to indicate this luminosity of being as the very center of the upward spiraling, the exercise of the intellectual imagination of the rational vehicle of the soul, the elevation of which indeed is reflected in the form of the spiral of Pythagoras as its very essence. For the inturning, the inward looking in Plato, there is an elevating dialogos, the inward looking of the soul is the inturning of the soul upon itself, is a winged elevation of the soul. We have already had a discussion on the wings of the soul, the inner doorway to discovery, through which our understanding, our self-knowledge, and our intellectual world is drawn upward toward the good, in the most ancient symbol of the flight of birds and the wing of the soul. This continued practice of inturning of our self-knowledge and our understanding in every circle of learning is, if you look at my videos, there is 30-odd videos of very pleasant watching. There you will note that there is an upward elevation in my own understanding, the summit of which is in the video, in this video, and it is the spiraling around a center. And I find it interesting in the very beautiful work of three brown and one blue is the video on Fourier transform, where I forgot now his name, indicates how waves are formed. And it's very interesting that each wave revolves around the center of mass. Very interesting. The first difference, so our center spiraling up, our soul is a harmonical being. And it precedes our bodies, the imagination of the good. In this particular philosophy of Plotinus and Proclus, the first difference, number, true living being, and psychical harmonics are the same within the highest self-luminous divine union of Pythagoras. The most divine imaginative intelligence, transcendent intelligence, which is transcendently greater than intellect, the ultimate luminous center around which all possible soul participations, as I prefer to put it, the vehicles of the soul and their patterns in all planes of harmonic formation revolve. And I couldn't do a kind of a spiral here, but imagine the through line of Pythagoras is like a spiral that spirals up like that. That's the idea. The whole of the sensibility of the world becomes manifest as one living harmonic form or subject matter participating in material luminous being, and is a living icon, a psycho-intellectual similitude of the intelligible summit of Plotinus, Proclus, and Pythagoras. A participating similitude and a psychical continuity indeed comprehended from within the most sacred union of the difference and similitude of intelligent beholding and the imaginative form of good. In addition to these things, the quadrivium of Pythagoras symbolizes the fivefold affordances of intellectual intuition and discovery through the dialectic ascent of the soul. Affordances, I use this term because the soul through an upward spiral learns all the time. This is not, I could quickly just go and swat up Plotinus and deliver a lecture on it. This is a lifestyle that we are talking about here. And we may say, which has been rediscovered, these 5 affordances, and has been rediscovered by the modern pioneer and true Platon, Thomas Taylor, for it is, as far as I can ascertain, nowhere will be seen in postmodern Gnostic and Stoic Neoplatonism. If anyone has any information, I would appreciate that. Perhaps we can collaborate at a future time. Which brings us to the miraculous triad, Quadrivium, of Pythagoras and the planes of world formation. And the view that we are about to present is according to paternal, abiding, proceeding, and returning. It's a circle, and the circle, as we said, is an upward spiraling and a downward spiraling. We will see how that works. So we first met our tetrad in video 8 and 9. The first and highest luminous summit is characterized by the unical and unity, is the paternal profundity of Pythagoras, and this precedes impartible causes. The second one, the impartible immovable causal plane, infinite multitude, all perfect multitude. The maternal profundity precede motive causes, moving causes, the supercosmic plane, the self-motive, the world soul, self-writing, which is interconnected with intellect. There are interconnections amongst these, which we will talk about as we unfold. And the supercosmic plane precede the mundane plane, which is received by the one form of the whole universe, and give completion to the world. Here we have Bacchus, the sixth king, which, as is usual for Nietzsche, say for instance, to write his lyrics about nihilism and things like that. The tragedies in Plato. Plato was against the tragedies of the clowns, the comedians. He did not embrace those, but that's just kind of a by the by. Sixth king Bacchus, the monad Dionysius. A closer investigation requires an orientation to these perspectives of the true followers of Pythagoras, the predecessor to Parmenides and Plato. The whole of the Pythagorean tetrad, which is an icon indicating a nested unity. Taylor, we use Thomas Taylor remarks, he says, the Pythagoreans employing number as a veil conceals through numbers, the mystic and enigmatic tradition of the sacred and divine teachings. Things are not straightforward. The tetrad contains all numbers within its nature in the manner of an exemplar, an archetype, an archetype. And hence it is that in monadic numbers, as they used to call those, 1, 2, 3, 4 added, are equal to 10. Today we call these integers. Hence the decad, the number 10, the unity of the number 10, exemplar, an archetype as an archetype, signified the ultimate perfection of beings, because number is a veil. The decad itself, hidden under the number 10, He signifies the ultimate perfection of beings, containing all things in his omniform or unical nature. Syrianus says, preceptor to Proclus, says to ascribe sensible numbers, that is to say, units that can be counted, to the Pythagoreans would be ridiculous and impious, for number received from Orpheus the principles of intelligible, unproceeding, and intellectual, proceeding numbers. He says, intelligible and intellectual numbers. Syrianus says, they assigned numbers, beings, an abundant progression and extended their dominion as far as the mundane sensibles themselves. Dionysius. Syrianus adds that number, difference, is the governing and self-begotten bond, which we've met earlier on. You'll have to rewind a little bit to see. It's the self-begotten bond of the eternal permanency of mundane natures. The bond of difference is the self-begotten bond of the eternal permanency of mundane natures. The miraculous tetrad, the unity of which is a wholeness. Pythagoras called intelligible ideas numbers. We've just seen the hiddenness of it, the arcana of it, and the gradual evolution of these from unity produced all the beautiful variety of forms that J.R.S. Mead talks about, also in arithmetic, geometry, and music, which living intellectual harmonics also constitute the harmonic formation of the world. Proclus says, all proportion subsists within the number 10. We see the harmonical proportion in the numbers 2, 3, 6, 3, 4, 6, and a geometrical proportion in numbers 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, and 1, 3, 9. I'm not going to do the actual things of them here because I need to think about that a little deeper. Hence, we see the arithmetical number in a natural progression in numbers from unity. In other words, in a natural progression. He says, since the causes of all things are contained in numbers, as far as to the decad, it is superfluous to suppose exemplars, paradigms or archetypes of the following numbers. Isn't that a beautiful statement of Proclus? Superfluous. I think Einstein uses that term too. The Pythagorean tetrad in descending order, a kind of a sum. We see here that unity, the unical number, unproceeding, is the paternal profundity which precede impartible causes. And here the unical hyparxis, the form of the good, luminous union, unity, and similitude. And this is incomposite, otherwise said, it's simple. It is the essence of a thing. Then here we have in descending order the impartible, immovable causal plane, this number proceeding, number unproceeding, number proceeding, wholeness, the maternal profundity, precede motive causes, which is here the supercosmic plane, the self-motive number progressing, the world soul. There is also deeper intellectual connections. In fact, there's deeper connections in all of these. Precede the mundane plane. The mundane whirlpool or plane, number ever forming, becoming. Whirlpool, this is also has to do with psychical harmonics, which we have met earlier on. In the fable of Psyche, Ceres is said to teach the planting of corn and the tilling of earth. And earlier in Diodorus Siculus, the translation of Henry Oldfather of Utah, in English, there is plenty of evidence that there is an internal information exchange, transfer actually, that's the better term that we used in our previous videos with the two horses, information transfer. And so that these vortices, the Magna Virago of Simplicius, the cloud of Juno of Homer, and the crater in the Hermetic works, number ever forming. This is all harmonics, but it is psychical harmonics. It's not physical harmonics. There is a lot of work on remote viewing, which we'll come to, and which is very interesting parapsychology, which doesn't require quantum mechanics and entanglement, etc., etc. Time is the measure of the order of motion according to the flux of form. Form in habitude. Bacchus, the sixth king, monad of the Titans, is number mirrored, mixed, the circular, the rectilinear, the more or the less, the greater, the greater, the smaller, the equal, the unequal, the four sections of the line of the Republic, give perpetual completion to the world. And here we see our icon depicting the celestial series. The earth belongs to the celestial series, but there is a super celestial place, which we'll probably come to that a little bit later, connected with the super celestial place, the intelligible place. This is earth, moon, the sun, which is an analogy with the good, connected with the maternal profundity, which comprehends the super celestial intelligible profundity. Unapparent circles of time of Proclus. There's many revolutions here that are unapparent, that we are unaware of. Is depicted with a circle, our circle here. Now, how are the three principles of Plotinus that subsist according to difference connected with Pythagoras? The three principles of Plotinus ranked according to difference and connection with the tetrad. First, the good is the first principle, beyond. Remember, the distinction here is according to difference and the connection with the Quadrivium of Pythagoras. So the first is the good beyond. The second principle is proceeding number and intelligible intellect, which would be the deity, the god Saturn, who comprehends Jupiter within itself, so he has an intelligible connection. It's analogous to the light proceeding from the sun. And the third principle, he connects with soul and the first movements, number, self-moving, the supermundane order, according to the great splendor of the cosmic web, communicated to others others meaning the posterior natures, because it precedes, by the light of the sun. So in Plotinus, number is either the essence of a thing, of the first being, or it is the intellect of the energy or activity of intellect, which have ether, intelligible ether as its abiding monad, and heaven as would be the monad of Saturn. And animal itself, soul itself, and intellect is number. Here I have some views of Thomas Taylor on the United in his dialogue on the gods. True luminous being is the first and highest of the things after the first cause, comprehending life and intellect. His threefold hypostasis has being, life, and intellect as a unity. So the first luminous being comprehends life and intellect according to cause. In video series 10, we have already unfolded how Proclus demonstrates this according to separation and according to wholeness and according to one being. So these unities must be, says Taylor, gods with a superessential subsistence. For what else prior to unities is it lawful to conjoin with the one? But if these divine natures are alone superessential, they will in no respect differ from the highest God. Since therefore there is difference, they must be participated by luminous beings. Our previous slides on difference are applicable. And every unity may be considered as the lucid blossom or the center of revolution of the being by which it is participated. That which is superessential, hyperousia, considered as participated by the highest or true being, constitute that which is called intelligible. The first procession from the first cause is the threefold superessential intelligible triad of Plotinus, which is the highest unified luminosity after first being the triad ad being, life, and intellect. And this pertains directly to our Professor Verwecke and the wonderful observation he makes of Pill, who divides this into 3 ontological levels. I'm going to leave it up to you to decide about this, and perhaps at a later point comment on this. I don't want to lose the thread. Given this background, in the next few slides we reflect partially the major points of this presentation on Plotinus in the summit of the Quadrivium of Pythagoras. Well, this to me is quite an interesting point, because Peary Grimes, who has a very, very great expose, as it were, or a philosophical opinion on Proclus, and the wonderful way that he is the quintessential intellect of his time, and his intellectual works are still today standing for his study. So he observes that this quadrivium is ignored by Carl Jung. Now, I've had a perplexion with, a long time ago I studied this Schopenhauer and Immanuel Kant. He's, I don't know, he didn't grip my soul all that much, but I was perplexed about how's this theory of matter, why is everything revolving around matter, until I got rather late in my life. I was like 58, or I don't want to say how old I am now, almost 70. Well, this is really clarifying a whole lot of things and questions in my own mind. So the quadrivium of Pythagoras is very, very important, because it is ignored by some. And of course, the fantasy, the imagination of the Greeks, are primitive. It's a primitive thing, and we've evolved from there. We've seen how this is really not the case. The Pythagorean tetrad require a much larger study of the philomythology and particularly the theologia mystica of Proclus. Today the people hold the academic holds that Plato has two things in his works, the Logos, Plato's Logos, and the other one is his Mythos. Well, there's a third one that's really astonishing for its absence, and that is his Theologia Mystica. This entirely is of the works of Orpheus and Plato. Isn't it interesting how we sort of select according to our, or elect to say some things and other things not? Real connections you're going to find on this, or my new podcast. This is also the first in my new podcast, which I am calling The Secrets of, I have to call it New Platonic, but it's really the latter Platon, that's The Secrets of Imagination. So the Pythagorean tetrad in its fullest composition is a study too big for this video. So the study of Proclus and the philomythology of Orpheus, Hermes in ancient Egypt is a prerequisite to Plotinus and Pythagoras. I guess it's back to the drawing board, as I say, because this studious form of learning with its fivefold affordances to the soul is a lifestyle. It's not like I said previously, I have a lecture on Plotinus tomorrow and I want to do X, Y, and Z. I'm just quickly going to read through the original Greek. It's not like this. It is an upward spiral, and Plato himself holds that his work, because of harmonics of sound and hearing, can be read on many, many levels, and this is true when one starts to make this a lifestyle. So its internal alchemical elevation happens in conjunction with the internal conversion and merging, as it were, of the intuition, imagination, the intellectual projection internally of our psyche with a higher intellect. A constant process of refinement, therefore, which is open-ended and inexhaustible. There's no such thing as the end of science. With reference to our learning and self-knowledge and our knowledge of the world and the reality we experience, which at any particular time is incomplete and commensurate with our self-knowledge. We begin with the highest luminous intelligent connections with reference to unity and union and the most luminous simplicity placed within the hyparxis of the Pythagorean tetrad. The Pythagorean tetradic hyparxis of unity and union. We see that there is a profoundly all-luminous, immaterial, unical, paternal and maternal profundity, and I'm using my icon pointing to the highest luminous being and the one beyond. And we are doing this according to connection, which is foundational in Pythagoras and in Orpheus and in the works of Taylor. Everywhere connection is one of the principal relations, or the relation, through relation of our own self-knowledge with reference to the luminosity of self. So according to connection, the hyparxis, the summit, of unity is connected with a super essential, which we've said 2 slides ago. The first cause of all luminous beings, unknown and beyond all being. The unproceeding union of Proclus is connected with this summit, and the summit is connected with beauty, truth, and symmetry, connected with the incomprehensible cause that we can't understand of all things. According to contact, connection according to contact, connected with the incomprehensible cause of all things. So here we find all kinds of hidden arcana. The hidden underneath the number of the Pythagoreans are these connections. And I've put the connections, I've taken the summit with its arrows, which is the color of the arrows noting life and an unceasing formation. We have beauty, truth, and symmetry in the center. We have power hidden, and we have one being, and being which is one of Proclus. And this would be his demonstration according to wholeness, where the one unproceeding is. Syrianus says on Clinius the Pythagorean, the father of Alcibiades, one of the dialogues of Plato, the one possesses absolute dominion, himself manifesting himself. And Taylor on Orpheus observes, the one is 3 times darkness. I think I wrongly said in my video 10 series that darkness is chaos, the first and alone power. I made a little mistake there. It really, this term pertains to the one. Well, why it is the one? Because we cannot say or think or visualize or image any one of these kinds of things in our language falls off from it. That transcends all material Gnostic illumination, that is to say, things of the nature of knowledge. There is connection in the Pythagorean tetrad, the Quadrivium, which I characterize as an ancient unified theory, which is totally lost. There is a connection in our Parxis in the summit with the first unproceeding number. The first difference and similitude is the form of the first motion, different from the one, the form of the first motion, different from the one, and constitute the principle of intelligible matter of Plotinus. The connection, one, many, and difference, infinite multitude, and difference is one intelligible, imaginative form and matter. The unical, self-beholding, self-similar, imaginative power and form of the good is in the connection with the good. The one is in this summit of Pythagoras. I hope it makes sense. It was really difficult for me to portray this without a million words to get to draw the essence. It required a lot of study and repeating circles, circling around the same subject as around the center. I hope it makes sense to you, because this is really a first, to my knowledge, the first unfoldment of this. So, connection according to intelligent beholding and imaginative form. Well, here I'm using my icon, which is the hyparxis of the whole tetrad, beholding, living, and true existence is the eternal. We have again the one unproceeding, and we have let's just repeat this, according to intelligent beholding and imaginative form, in true luminous being, real being, to perceive intellectually, to live and to exist, are in continuous eternal existence. They are all connate, subsisting together. Intelligible matter, true living being, are eternal, immutable, and incorruptible. These are important terms to keep in mind for what's coming. Here, indicated according to, in this our icon, to intelligible wholeness, which hold in one being unical multitude hidden. This is all arcane enigmas of number in Pythagoras. One being who possess one being, well, the difference, possess unical multitude hidden, and being which is one has unical multitude also hidden in itself. But beholding, living, and existing is eternal and consubsists as a whole unity. There's nothing separate here. And we have power, the first alone feminine power, hidden under union, says Proclus. An excess of union hides the feminine power. Philolaus, the Pythagorean, in 470 BC, the one established the unical deity, bound and infinity, masculine and feminine in Proclus, and it's connected, the hyparxis is connected, the harmonic mixture of the first unical divinity, the duad, bound, infrangible. We are not able to divide anything in it. There's no duality here. Bound in infinity, brings forth from within itself the luminous form of true living being and intelligible matter. This is Plotinus. We see in this hyparxis the all-luminous self. This is an icon that we've really expanded here. All luminous self, or true living being, the cosmic egg. This is all internal. It's all internal, the cosmic egg of Orpheus. And it's connected with the infinite and alone maternal or feminine power, who is hidden, as we just said, under an excess of union of Proclus. The hyparxis of Pythagoras is a profoundly all-luminous, immaterial, unical paternal and maternal profundity. The connection, the other connections are the true self-luminous living being, very important. We missed this. I missed a couple of times while studying in Proclus. Comprehend all forms, all harmonic forms or patterns in one. Hidden multitude, infinite multitude, subsisting in one form, is in one intelligible matter, of which the many are forms, all forms in one luminous matter. Intelligible matter and the beauty of true luminous being, one all luminous unproceeding form. All superessential unities are divinities, gods, with the scepter of dominion and true existence. From within this connection, the hyparxis, the first internal procession from the first cause, brings forth true luminous being, comprehends all forms, brings forth the threefold hypostasis of Plotinus, pertaining to our first introduction, which is the profoundly united luminous threefold form of intelligible being, life, and intellect. And we have depicted it in this icon with a triangle, being, intellect, and life, the classical logical demonstration of it. But we prefer our icon with consisting of nested spheres to depict the same thing. The first alone, infinite power hidden. So we have Plotinus' threefold intelligible being, life, and intellect, all luminous divine forms, which are described as first union, unical, united. The alone unity are unitedly all in all. Taylor. There's no separation at all here. True living being is beyond, true living being is beyond and hold the bonds of the following luminous divinities within itself. Threefold bound or ether is mixed from bound and infinity, the first unical God, deity, from the first alone and infinite feminine power. We have, so if I might just click back here on, you will see that I'm adding here some things in the next on the next slide. So we see here I'm adding power, motion, activity, and energy. The threefold ether or bound, a paternal, is mixed from the first alone and infinite feminine power. In video 10b we have indicate how this in more detail how this happens. So we have power, motion, activity, and energy of ether activity. The unical deity, eternity, aeon, is mixed from bound and infinity, and it denotes immutable time and bound, and it denotes permanency, the stable and the ever of Taylor and Orpheus. So luminous being precede threefold ether, power, motion, and activity, and this pertains to all universal and sensible formations preceding. Then we see the whole of the hyparxis of Orpheus and Pythagoras precede the totality of the internally proceeding immaterial and progressing psycho-intellectual formation of the world, as I just said, without division or separation. There's no separation here, it's all a unity. The threefold hypostasis of Plotinus, being, life, and intellect, brings forth through power, the maternal power, motion, activity of immaterial ether, internally proceeding. Here we have proceeding internally from the threefold hypostasis, all perfect, immovable multitude. In our introduction, we have seen that this infinite multitude is taken by Gnostic and Stoic philosophers as material point. And so we have seen that being, intellect, and life precede the impartible and the immovable causal plane according to connections. So we have the impartible, immovable plane, which I'm indicated below. It should be regarded in inverted commas because there's no below here. It's all the same unity. all perfect intelligible multitude participating the luminosity of true living being. And all perfect multitude, the maternal profundity, with intelligible ether as the abiding monad of heaven, we'll come to this shortly, is a wholeness internally proceeding through itself. So it's all interconnected. In more detail, the maternal profundity, which we have depicted here as all perfect multitude, intelligible ether is the monad abiding, heaven is the paternal monad of Saturn and Jupiter, so it's all a unity. We have heaven and earth, the duad, the indefinite duad. So we previously we have seen bound infinity, the unical duad. So we have heaven and earth proceeding from there. We'll come to that. So the maternal profundity, the middle luminous vitality, connecting, which I characterize as a interconnecting light bridge beyond the sensible world. She is the comprehending middle intelligible vitality, preceding all sensible intellectual motion and activity, and precede all secondary progressing harmonic forming aspects or planes, participating the luminosity of true living being, or the luminosity of the true self of Homer. Maternal profundity precede and comprehend within herself the totality of the following principle: participative, connective, perfective, convertive, and causal source planes of world formation. We have these connections, which we are not going to do here. This is going to take another 10 videos to unfold. We have the connection here is intelligible and at the same time intellectual order of Saturn and heaven. And we have the intellectual causal plane of Jupiter. We have the cosmic causal plane of the world soul. We have the liberated and vivific plane, which is connected with heaven. And we have the mundane forming plane, which is connected with Dionysius or Bacchus. Those we are not treating of here. So in the next couple of slides, we are just going to focus on the duads, the unical gods of Pythagoras, the all-perfect vitality and participation. So our analysis addresses exclusively the interrelation and connectivity of the unical duad bound infinity, the indefinite duad heaven and earth, and the definite duad ocean and tethys, our free principle duads. Previously we said the harmonic mixture of the duad bound in infinity brings forth from within itself, from within their mixture, harmonic mixture, the luminous form of true living being. But in addition to this, we see the duad bound in infinity generates from within itself the indefinite duad, immaterial heaven and earth. I know this is a little technical, but it's really important to understand the differences, to acquaint ourselves with the true philosophy of Plotinus, which really in our next video we're going to talk about imagination of Plotinus proper. So this is all background information pertaining to that. So the unical God bound infinity generates from their harmonic mixture whirlpool. This is indicated by our arrows here. The indefinite duad, immaterial heaven and earth. So according to connection with respect to earth, intelligible earth is analogous to the first and alone power, feminine power, chaos, also known as Maya, the Holy Spirit, Fantasia, Night, Isis, Neith. There is 1,000 names for the Divine Mother. Connection with respect to heaven, intelligible heaven, immaterial heaven, analogous to the good, and the unical profundity. Intelligible ether is the monad, the abiding monad of heaven. So we have the paternal monads here, and the paternal is capable of division, not the maternal. So the indefinite duad, intelligible heaven and earth, we made a little overlap there, foreshadow. Now there's a new thing, the sensible heaven and earth. What did our fathers do with the split? We wonder. The indefinite duad, heaven and earth, generates from within itself the definite duad, ocean and tethys. Why is it called a definite duad? We will see in a minute. And we will do the connections, the connection of both ocean and tethys. I can note here that Pierre Grimes, the inimitable and beautiful Pierre Grimes, with his philosophical midwifery, which is really, really good, places ocean and tethys in the mundane world, along with the Balboa family. Wonderful works on Proclus. But we'll see if there is a difference. So the definite duad is the same with the connate, the inborn, innate, kindred brothers. Kindred's the word. They are of the same family as heaven and earth, forming the connate, forming media between intelligible heaven and earth and intelligible intellect, Saturn and Rhea. So they're situated between. I put them here so that we see that they're in the middle, and their relations are with respect to this internal formation. It's all a moving formation, at once moving formation, nothing static here. So that we see that ocean and tethys, the definite duad, possess the following bridging, intelligible and at the same time intellectual connections. Intelligible, heaven and earth, and intellectual would be Saturn and Jupiter. So difference, motion and permanency, we've previously superposed the difference being motion and activity, and the participation of all perfect multitude. So let me say this again: difference, motion and permanency, and the participation of all perfect multitude who participates, the true living being, and the internally proceeding subtle vehicles of ether, subtle harmonic patterns through impartible bridging media. So they are bridging all perfect multitude through impartible bridging media as follows. The definite duad, ocean and tethys, is connected with both the indefinite duad, heaven and earth, and intelligible intellect, heaven and Saturn, as we have just seen. We are going to make another video with just the intelligible and at the same time intellectual connection, because it is a little complicated. But ocean is internally separated from Saturn according to difference, while Saturn is comprehend all perfect, intelligible and intellectual unity without separation. No separation here, no duality here. An ocean who is different from and analogous to the one and separated from Saturn is the abiding cause of difference and division. The paternal form is capable of division and is connate with impartible heavens. The ocean is connate with, there's no separation between the two, and it's an internal proceeding. No, I've lost it now. So the difference is connected with the division of intelligible luminous matter, power, and the definite duad, ocean and thesis. Since paternal form is divisible, as we just said, and since all perfect multitude is eternally invariant with respect to the progression of sensible changes in matter, sensible. Proclus's proposition 208 to 212, we see, since this is the case, we see the following connections. We see ocean abiding, the supplier of all ethereal motion, the abiding monad, and is assimilate to, that is connate with, impartible, intelligible, feminine earth. Ocean is connate with. We see Tethys, who is the middle, Tethys here, the middle feminine vitality and vivifying infinity, connate with impartible material earth. Yes, heaven and earth, both feminine, but it's all a unity, proceeding internally. So, and we see Tethys is the prolific separating cause, establishing posterior connections, progressions permanently within herself, and is assimilated to connate with Saturn and Rhea. And as it appeared to me, these connections, all perfect, intelligible light breach, the maternal profundity and immovable vitality possess the invariance of imaginative ethereal forms. The invariance of imaginative ethereal forms, imagination of the good, of all the downward continuous external progressions and divisions of the whole sensibility of the world. We learn from Taylor and Proclus that luminous harmonic imaginative vehicles of ether and bound are brought forth and are eternally emitting from within the vitality of the immaterial profundity, eternally emitting, emanation. Really, I prefer the term projection. Proclus teaches us, he says, all perfect multitude, impartible vital forms, do not immediately proceed into the sensible material genera. For the ethereal vitality of all perfect multitude is impartible and immovable and immovable causes precede intellectual causes. Interesting, isn't it? Since, therefore, we see on the grounds of the unfoldments above that Orpheus, Pythagoras, Parmenides, Plato, Proclus appear not to split the infrangible union of either the unical duad, bound infinity, or the indefinite duad, heaven and earth, and in addition, nor do we see them split the definite duad, ocean and tethys. And since the indefinite duad, heaven and earth, both precede and is the fountain foreshadowing the whole sensible heaven, since this is the case, and since Proclus indicate that invariant infinite multitude, or all perfect multitude, do not immediately proceed into material natures, perhaps we've just overlooked this, how shall we come to understand the meaning of the unical duad? Taylor observes this in his philomythological theory, which he uses to distinguish it from material mythology, and against which Plutarch himself, in his address to Clea, warns that those who interpret the gods as through vegetable icons and fertility dolls have a problem with interpretation of this marvelous hyparxis of Pythagoras. So he observes the following with reference to the duad. He says, difference is the progeny, the offspring, the kindred of the duad. Difference is the progeny of the duad. We've seen the unical God bound in infinity up here. A duad proceed from a duad, being assimilated to or connate according to the whole of itself, to the duad generating it. Hence, the profoundly unical duad bound infinity generates from within itself the internally proceeding indefinite, infinite duad, heaven and earth, immaterial unity. And in the same manner, the indefinite duad, heaven and earth, generates the definite duad, ocean and tethys. Hence we see that the duad defines and distinguishes the differences, the causes of itself, and all number posterior to itself. This is a little dense, but I think if we look at this a few times, it will all make sense. On this account, therefore, we see the definite duad, ocean and tethys, bringing forth from within themselves posterior intellectual progressions, all continuity, contact and connection, according to difference, similitude, permanency, motion, the same and different, division and separation of ether or paternal bound. We note here, this part concludes our analysis of the Pythagorean duadic unfoldments. These three duads are not separate, they are internally generated from each other, and they cannot be divided because they are of the nature of energy, activity, life, being, and motion, all living. Hence, we may indeed observe that Guthrie and more recent expositors, postmoderns, Neoplatonism, indicate that the cause that the indeterminate dyad, infinite multitude, split off from the divinity, heaven and earth, more particularly, split off from the divinity, is tolma, rashness or boldness. Everything outside of the divinity is in a continuous state of flux, and evil is then that which is opposed to good. If therefore we say they ascribe the split of the Pythagorean and Orphic duadic unities, unical gods, to Plato and Pythagoras, Plotinus and Proclus. They seem to wander far away from our ancient sages, for a flowing sensible flux in Plato indicate the perpetual unceasing ingress and egress of progressing form or image. The world soul expels the subtle imaginative forms of fantasia through a continuous perpetual flowing flux throughout the whole sensibility of the universe, using imaginative subtle psychical patterns or forms as matter. This is an amazing statement that Plotinus makes here. He says, the world soul intellectually comprehending, that's what we're saying, intellectually comprehending the motion, activity, and power of subtle aerial forms seated within herself. Forms, in the previous video, we saw how the patterns, forms of this have their seats in the soul, and governs the ingress and egress of all souls, a continuous, perpetual flowing flux. Here is the enigmatic thing about the internal alchemical transfer of the conceptions of Plotinus. As we have seen, the self-luminous form of difference, sorry about a mistake, is the principal bond of all progressing forms and formation, and not matter. Since that's the case, since the invariance of all perfect infinite multitude precede body and matter, and since intelligible matter, not subsisting as any definite form in the sensible world, very important, intelligible matter possess the totality of its subsistence as the state or condition of all generated or flowing, forming, sensible natures, including heaven, the sensible earth and heaven. This omnipresent state of intelligible matter, ever present in the whole of the world, is the receptacle of the one form of the total sensibility of the universe and of all subject matter. We remind you earlier on in our video, we have had Proclus explaining, we had a summary of our previous video, what Proclus really is saying about this. These are, to me, amazing statements, perhaps missed by Mead. The man is a philologist, and they pride themselves on their knowledge of Greek, and he says that philosophy is philology is such a high science. Well, it is, but it's not an exact science. So I'm dwelling off of the point just to summarize here, because it's really important in our next video on Plotinus. Since intelligible matter, not subsisting as any definite form in a sensible world, intelligible matter possesses the totality of its subsistence as the state or condition of all generated, flowing, forming, sensible natures. This is Pythagoras. This omnipresent state of intelligible matter, ever present in the whole of the world, is the receptacle of the one form of the total sensibility of the universe and of all subject matter. Unchanging intelligible matter will necessarily preserve the same bond of difference and its continuity throughout the world, throughout all world formation, I should say all possible world formations. On this account, we see how philo-mythological King Zeus establishes the one form of the sensible heaven as one only and solitary, analogous to the good, the paradigmatic, and the demiurgic cause. It's difficult for me to perceive how Mead concludes in his theory of matter that Plotinus is that this theory of matter of Plotinus is weak. On the contrary, and based on the preceding, I'm amazed at this worldview of Plotinus, which is supported at its foundation by Pythagoras and more ancient people, has been in obscurity for almost 2,000 years. Moreover, if postmodern philosophers say that there is intelligent design of Dembski, Gibson, Michael Behe, Stephen Meyer, McGilchrist, Rebecca, and our good professors in pure matter and its march through complexity through time, if they say this, that this intelligent design with its imprinted DNA language of Lennox, the wonderful mathematician, philosopher, a wondrous thing evolving complexity from pure matter and from a far distant cause and time, is the essence of the Plotinian and Pythagorean world perspective. If they say this, they would be straying from Pythagoras, Orpheus, Plotinus, and Proclus, and Plato to a remarkable degree, as we have just seen. The Quadrivium of Pythagoras, an uninvestigated grand unified theory. Why do I say this? Because there is all the research on mathematics, Fibonacci sequence, the spiral of Pythagoras. There is some veritable mathematical works have come out of Pythagoras. For instance, his music scale lasted for almost 1,500 years. When up until Galileo's father, who was able to improve it with the Pythagorean comma. It spawned vast works. Well, here we have something that was deliberate, from as it appeared to me, is not addressed by academic philosophers. And they each have their own design for which I cannot speak. But here we have a psychical unified theory in Pythagoras, his whole quadrivium, unexplored. What about the separation of the threefold unical hypostasis of Plotinus into three primary levels of ontology, being, life, and intellect, representing three primary ontological levels of reality? If they say that the threefold immaterial hypostasis of Plotinus is seated in the ontological material world, they would appear to concur with the inverted light cone of the wonderful Bergson, and with, sorry, I need to take my thing off here. If they say the threefold immaterial hypostasis of Plotinus is seated in the ontological material world of pure materia, they would appear to concur with the inverted light cone of the wonderful Bergson, and with the material point without the emanation of Plotinus or of the much earlier Robert of Lincoln. And if they say that they separate the unity of the threefold hypostasis by retranslating it into three ontological levels in matter, for this is my understanding of their meaning. If this is their meaning, they would appear to split up and separate the unity of his unical threefold hypostasis. But this would be impossible in the true light world of Plotinus. as it appear to me. For as it is, all perfect immovable multitude, infinite multitude, is generated from within this ineffable immaterial threefold hypostasis of Plotinus, which precede immovable and all perfect multitude, and which precede the totality of the sensible world. But we should not be surprised and concerned about institutional but we should be surprised and concerned about institutional gatekeeping and the blatant ignorance of and the deafening silence about the Quadrivium of Pythagoras proper, also noted for his absence in Jung by Pierre Grimes. Given all the perspectives above, what is it that Proclus himself is saying to us about the ineffable luminosity of light and of place in his harmonics and world formation? Alrighty. Proclus on light and place. He says the following about place. Conceive therefore two spheres, of which one is composed of many beautiful cosmic bodies, and thither a second sphere composed of light alone, and let both be of an equal bulk, says he, stature, mass, and size, like that. Then, by establishing the sphere of light together with the center, and giving the composite sphere of many bodies a revolution simultaneous with the circumscribing sphere of light, you will perceive the world moved in immovable vitality of light, and according to its whole extension, immovable, similar to place. All perfect multitude, vitality, the connecting light bridge preceding the formation of the world. And if this be admitted, it is evident that immovable light is a divine body by far less material than the rest, and indeed less than the matter contained in things which are moved. Hence, if light is the most simple of these, there is an analogy he is using for fire is more incorporeal than the other elements, and fire is lucid. It will be manifest that since light is the purest among the rest, light will be place, which we indicated as best we can with this sphere here. Simplicius says, he observes, probably one of the most astute observations of him, the unreceptiveness of intelligible matter is preserved by the assertion that it is the place of form and forms. To say, therefore, says he, that intelligible matter is changing and corruptible is not to preserve the same stable bond of difference throughout the formation of the world. That we will remember, I'm just going to take my picture off here, the difference of similitude, that the difference of similitude is the imaginative, intelligent, beholding form of the good. This is a very high unfoldment of Plotinus, and if you look at our video 10a and b, you will note that I had a similar conception of this, and this difference, which always produces intelligible matter, possess the creative tension of opposite, tunos, and the practice of virtue and love through inner contact, with reference to difficulty all the pain we experience, suffering in our lives, conjoins us with the center of all things. The center of all things. This is the foundation of Proclus. This icon here, the circle is formed by the radius from the center, and if you revolve it, you get a sphere. Hence, says Plotinus, the light of intelligibles is not distant from sensibles by place, since light is place, but it's different by otherness and difference. It's distant by otherness and difference. When therefore difference is not present, then the natures which are not different are present with each other. The principle of all things, therefore, not having any difference, is always present, but we are present with it when we have no difference. His ecstasy. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and like, and we will see you in our next video on the imagination and Plotinus.